This is another very hard day for Halifax, for Nova Scotia, and for our armed forces families.
This is a time of agony for all families, friends, and fellow crew members. There is nothing worse than sending your shipmates over the horizon and losing contact.
There will be many questions about how this tragedy occurred, and I can assure you we will get answers in due course.
To those of you in agony, awaiting the word on the fate of their missing loved ones, we stand with you and are searching as hard as we can.
All of them are heroes. Each of them will leave a void that cannot be filled.
Hi there and welcome to Power and Politics. I'm Vashi Kapellos. A search and rescue mission is underway as we speak off the coast of Greece, where a Canadian military helicopter crashed in the Mediterranean Sea yesterday with 6 Canadian soldiers on board. One of those armed forces members is confirmed dead, Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra, a naval officer based in Nova Scotia. She was just 23 years old. These are the 5 others aboard the helicopter who all remain missing. Captain Brenden Ian MacDonald from Nova Scotia, Captain Kevin Hagen from British Columbia, Captain Maxime Miron-Morin from the province of Quebec, Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike, also from Nova Scotia, and Master Corporal Matthew Cousins from Ontario. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan will join us in a moment to talk about the investigation into what happened. But first, let's bring in the CBC's Murray Brewster, our senior defense correspondent. He's, of course, been on top of this since the initial reports out of Greece yesterday. He joins us from his home in Ottawa. Hey, Murray, that investigation, thanks for being with us. That investigation has obviously commenced. There is a team of people from Canada, from the armed forces, headed over there or about to head over there. What can you tell us about what we do know so far about what happened?
We did get a little bit more information today when the Chief of the Defense Staff held a media availability, and also, too, just a short while ago, the commander of 12 Wing Shearwater and the commander of the Canadian Atlantic Fleet held an availability. So what we've been able to piece together thus far is that the Cyclone helicopter was on a routine training/surveillance mission yesterday, late in the afternoon. It was on its way back to HMCS Fredericton, which is part of the NATO task group in the Mediterranean, when the Fredericton suddenly lost contact. And basically, it appears that the aircraft went into the ocean, but it clearly hit at a high speed, because some of the information that General Vance brought forward today was the fact that the debris field on the ocean floor is rather wide, so that sort of indicates a high-speed impact. The other aspect is that, and this has likely been hampering in the search and rescue operation, is the fact that the sea level in that area the sea is rather deep. It's about 3,000 meters, and that is very deep, and that could very well impact the recovery operation, and it could make it difficult for the investigation.
Yeah, I was going to say that must be the primary challenge in the investigation. What other challenges might there be as that investigation commences?
Well, the investigators did manage to get at least a little bit of a leg up, in the sense that the flight data recorders, they were on the surface. They had floated to the surface. They were designed to float to the surface after impact. So, and those boxes have been recovered, and they're going to be analyzed by the National Research Council. So that's a plus, and that means that we may get some information within the next few days, or perhaps within a week, about a preliminary cause to this tragedy. But the other aspect that is going to probably hamper the investigation is the fact that the wreckage is perhaps so deep, and there is the possibility that Canada is going to have to call on its allies, such as the United States and Britain, which have submersible equipment that can go down to those depths. So it is something that's going to unfold over the next few days as the investigation team arrives.
When General Vance spoke earlier today, he talked about how it was about 6:52 local time in the evening when the helicopter lost contact with the vessel, and that they were returning to the vessel. He did not see there was no contact, no quote unquote shoot down. What other clues do we have, or are there clues about what might have happened here, Murray?
Well, given the fact that it happened so suddenly, given the fact that the aircraft had been in the air for about 2.5 hours conducting its operation, it suggests a catastrophic failure of some kind. Now, General Vance has ruled out a shoot down. Does this mean that there was some kind of mechanical failure? Now, that's yet to be determined, but an aircraft suddenly doesn't fall from the sky. And so this is the sort of, I think, the area that the investigators are going to be focusing on and what sort of mechanical issue may have taken place.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks for the update, Murray. As always, the CBC's Murray Brewster. For more on the investigation into the helicopter crash and efforts to recover the missing, I'm joined now by Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defence. He's in the foyer of the House of Commons. Hi, Minister. Thanks for being with us.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Minister, when the Prime Minister delivered the news this morning, one body at the time had been recovered and 5 Canadians were missing. Is that still the case?
Yes, I just want to take this opportunity to pass on my personal condolences to Abigail's family and to the families of the 5 other members who are currently missing, that we are putting all the resources, not just of Canada's, but of our allies, and we will leave no stone unturned for this effort.
We add our condolences to yours, Minister. Can you help us understand what you know so far? And I, of course, take the point that this is very, very early on the investigation. What we know from what General Vance said was that the vessel lost contact with the cyclone at about 6:52 p.m. Local time.
Yes.
What do you know about what happened after that?
We don't have more. One of the things is, I can assure you that we will get to the bottom of exactly what has happened. This is one of the reasons why we have sent a investigative Canadian Armed Forces flight safety investigative team to the site, and they will get to the bottom of this. We have recovered the voice and data recorders, and they will be brought back, and the analysis will be done. But this just goes to show in a very poignant way that as we deal with the crisis inside Canada with COVID-19, that we have women and men in the Canadian Armed Forces who are serving us on international operations on a daily basis in these type of conditions. And in this regard, we will make sure that we put all the resources necessary and making sure that the families are well looked after as well.
Has that flight safety team departed Canada?
Since I've been in meetings with the cabinet, so I haven't had an updated date just yet. But one thing I can assure you, once we do find out, we will give regular updates to Canadians and to the families as well.
And when they do arrive there, do you know, or can you be specific about what role they'll have in the investigation? What types of things will they be doing?
Just like the Transportation Board has their investigative teams, we have our own, and that's what they will do. I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but I've regrettably gone through another situation where we lost an F-18, had to go through that process. One thing I can assure you, the investigation is absolutely thorough. You get to learn exactly what's happened. More importantly, the recommendations that are made so that we can prevent situations like this. And we have taken steps from previous accidents as well. And so that's what the team will do. It will be a very thorough investigation, and we will leave no stone unturned for this. I
do want to ask, just in the vein of what you just mentioned, again, noting that it is early on in, is there any indication, was there sort of a Mayday sign or a Mayday call, any indication that this could have been due in any part to mechanical failure?
You know what, one thing in situations like this is not for anybody to speculate, and I don't want to add to that either. The investigation team will get on the ground, and as we learn more and it's appropriate, we will make sure that the families are kept up to date as well, and then we'll make sure that Canadians are kept to date. But the most important thing out of this is all the resources from our allies and the countries that I have mentioned. I've been on the phone with a number of my counterparts and offering up their full support in this endeavor to making sure that the search continues for the missing 5 Canadian Armed Forces members.
What is your level of confidence, Minister, in the technical capabilities of the cyclones? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. In looking back into as much information as I could get about these helicopters, I came across reporting on a May 2015 internal D&D memo that said there was a risk that the new cyclone might not have powerful enough engines to meet all critical performance requirements in the line of duty. There was also a requirement for the gearbox, the amount of time that they could fly with an oil leak in the gearbox. It was downgraded during the sort of contractual process significantly from 60 to 30 minutes. Are you confident in the technical capacity of these helicopters?
For one, we have confidence in the equipment that we give our Canadian Armed Forces members. And in this particular case, this project did take a long time. We received the aircraft in June 2015, I believe. And I believe when I became minister and later on that year, actually within that first month, I actually visited Shearwater and particularly this program. Got to see that the work that they were doing. It was absolutely amazing to see the technical and ingenuity that our people brought to this project, where they talked about, we looked at the simulators, the training. And I visited actually last summer as well to see that type of work that was going on. And the commander of the Air Force, once that he was satisfied with the capability of the aircraft, capability of the crews. That's how it's authorized for a crew and aircraft to deploy. So these aircraft with crews have deployed a number of times on Operation Reassurance. In fact, actually, even in December, I was actually in the Mediterranean with two of my defense critics on the cyclone itself. So it is a tremendous aircraft, but nonetheless, this is an absolute tragedy, and we're going to get to the bottom of this, and our investigators will leave no stone unturned so that we can get the answers for the families.
General Vance said that there was an operational pause. Can you explain in layman's terms, with the fleet, I should say, can you explain in layman's terms exactly what that means and what you will require to lift that pause?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the safety of our Canadian Armed Forces members, this is something that we take very seriously. So it's very prudent for the Commander of the Air Force to conduct an operational pause. So these type of aircrafts will not fly until the investigators do their preliminary work. He will be briefed, will brief the Chief of Defense Staff and myself to look at the next steps. And then only from that time, further decisions will be made on which direction to go. This is how seriously we take the safety of our Canadian Armed Forces members, even in a tragic situation like this.
Just to be clear, Minister, would you have to, would it have to be that mechanical failure is ruled out for you to lift that pause?
I leave that to the experts. The team that we have the full technical and expert ability to be able to make those assessments, and the decision will be made by the Commander of the Air Force in this regard. So I leave those decisions to them, but I look forward to the continual briefings.
I'm just asking as Minister, though, if there is a technical problem with the cyclone, do you need to be assured that there is not a problem before you're comfortable with the operational pause ending?
One thing I can assure you that from the Chief of Defense Staff would never recommend to me until that he is fully confident in the capability of this aircraft and any equipment that we have, and that gives. And I have a lot of trust in the leadership of the Canadian Armed Forces, especially when it comes to this investigation team. I've seen this team in action before, and they have done tremendous work. The recommendations that I've made and changes that comes from the recommendations. But these are the early days, and I don't want to jump ahead in this case. This is just very prudent measures that we take for the safety and security of our Canadian Armed Forces personnel.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this evening, Minister Sajjan.
Great, thank you for having me.
The Cyclone helicopters in the Canadian fleet have been put on an operational pause as a precaution, General Vance said, and the search continues, of course, for those missing. Renée Filiatrault is a former Foreign Services officer and former staff to 3 defense ministers. She joins us now from Ottawa. Hi, Renée. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Vashi. Thanks for having me.
No, I really appreciate it. I was anxious to get your insights as I saw all this unfold. First of all, you were involved in government for so long. What was your reaction on hearing this awful news?
Well, like a lot of Canadians, just devastated. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, I've been in government a while, and I've seen too many of these types of situations, and as has been said many times today, it shows once again and demonstrates that the Canadian Armed Forces are doing important but dangerous work.
They sure are, not just the work they're doing in this instance, but of course, as we talk about this, they're deployed in long-term care homes in both Ontario and Quebec. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about the nature of the investigation. So we know that it's a NATO mission. We'd heard that Italy, Turkey, and the United States are all taking part in the investigation. What does the search and rescue mission look like? What might we anticipate over the next couple of days?
Well, I think the way you asked that question, Vashi, just put an emphasis on exactly the right thing, in the sense that this is a multinational operation. It is a NATO operation, as is most of the operations related to Russia, because solidarity amongst our allies is what you want to show. And that interoperability and the work with our allies is important. So the actual search and rescue operation, just like the exercising and just like the training, a search and rescue operation would also be multinational in nature. We train to get the Canadian Armed Forces and our allies train together, they serve together, and when something like this happens, they respond together.
What about the, I guess, should we be taking it as good news or a little bit optimistic that the flight recovery data is there, that both recorders have been recovered, they're coming back actually to Canada to be analyzed, and that there's also a flight safety crew, according to General Vance and Minister Sajjan, heading over there to participate in the investigation?
Yeah, just like in the civilian world where the TSB, the Transportation Safety Board, does an investigation, the military does this as well. And they're on their way there now. Obviously, it's good news that the flight safety recorders and all of that evidence is there to be investigated, because it'll be very important as it relates to what the results of that investigation is.
How significant is the collection of the debris in order to reach any kind of conclusion in that investigation? And the reason I'm asking you is because General Vance and others pointed out that the debris area is just so vast. It's going to be one of the big challenges of this investigation.
It's challenging on so many levels, but any evidence is going to be pretty critical in figuring out and finding out what's happened here. But they won't stop. I mean, the investigation will happen. And they won't stop investigating until they have as many of the answers as they can in this situation, like they always do. There's always an investigation, and if the history has had anything to show, the Canadian Armed Forces does come to ground on what the answers are.
What about these cyclones? And I want to point out for our audience, we have no idea what caused this crash. That is very clear right now. There are obviously a lot of us trying to determine what it could be just by some of the information that has already been provided by the Canadian Armed Forces, or the lack of, lots of stuff that we know that the weather wasn't bad, that kind of thing. The cyclones themselves, do you have any questions about them? Are you confident in them? What do you think?
I'm confident in them. The Chief of Defense Staff said he was confident in the cyclones today. But what's most important, the person who needs to be truly confident in the cyclones is the Commander of the Air Force. And I can tell you that the Air Force, having worked with the military over that past decade, would never fly anything ever unless they were confident in flying it. It's not a circumstance where they assume everything's fine, and then when something happens, they lose faith. They constantly have faith in the aircraft that they fly. As a matter of fact, at National Defense, there's a cell called the Airworthiness Cell, and its entire job is to ensure that everything that the Air Force uses is airworthy. They would never fly anything that's not. So I take at his word what the chief said today about it having confidence in the airframe and the mission systems. But to your question about the cyclone, it is an extremely sophisticated machine, and it's very different from the Sea King, its predecessor. The airframe itself, as well as the mission systems, the guts in the aircraft, are state of the art. So it's an exceptional machine. And we'll just have to see, what the investigation bears out about the cause of the events of the past day. But we should look to the military to state whether or not they have confidence. And a second point to make is there's some confusion about the difference between grounding a fleet.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. Yeah, because there's just for our audience, General Vance did say that there's an operational pause, but they're not grounding the fleet.
Yeah, and that's really important distinction. When the Snowbirds, for example, you remember recently the Snowbirds had an issue with the jump seats. They grounded the air fleet to ensure because there was a concern or potential concern. Operational pause is standard in theater activity. It happens when something happens. If you remember, again, recently in the killing of Soleimani, there was an operational pause for our mission there in order to really for in theater people to take a knee and for normal operations to pause so that they can refocus on the effort. And in this case, the effort is very much the search and rescue operation. And so that, and the operational pause is very different than a grounding of the fleet. If there's any indication that there's concern for a technicality, certainly the Command of the Air Force and the Chief of Defense would ground the fleet.
And on the operational pause, that gets lifted, my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's again the head of the Air Force that decides, that has to make the determination and then says, okay, we can lift the pause.
It's very much the military. It's very much those on the ground, as well as in consultation. And the Commander of the Air Force, you're right, Chief of Defense are the ultimate authorities on operational pauses. So it would be informed by what's happening on the ground. And I think it's important to note that on the ground, as the search and rescue operation is happening, all nations, not just Canada, but as you mentioned, Italy and the United States and the Turkish military, as well as the Greeks, everybody is helping. So it's an effort that covers a multinational group of nations. So it's in theater and ultimately military, as you said.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Renée. Great pleasure to have you with us this evening.
Thank you. You too.
Renée Filiatrault. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.